So again, I'm Joe Bloom, Product Manager for Jamf Pro. Hashtag again, JNUC 2016 security. And I'll just do a quick rundown through our agenda for today. If you were at the Jamf Cloud presentation that I did, I like to have a learning objective, really kind of an action item takeaway for you. So I'm going to give you some homework, and that's going to be your takeaway for today. We're going to talk a little bit about just kind of compliance, do some like audit housekeeping. I'll talk through some of those things a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about macOS and iOS security, but really that's touching on kind of Apple native security things that we like about Apple because Apple's a very secure platform. And I'll talk a little bit about the features and functions that are associated with some of the latest operating system releases. I'll talk also about infrastructure security because I know that that's very important. And again, if you're at the cloud session, one of my big messages was that security is the foundation for innovation. And I really do mean that because when we develop new features, we have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence from a compliance standpoint, from a security standpoint, so that we can get it into your hands and make sure you can leverage those technologies. I'll also then, at the end, I'm going to flood you with a bunch of resources. So we only have 45 minutes, and security is a big topic. Now, I'm trying to keep it, because this is a product session, very much focused on product features, but there's a lot of resources out there. If you haven't looked for all of the Jamf and Jamf Nation resources, I'll point out some of the key ones that can help you. And I really want you, kind of as part of that learning objective, to take a look at those resources, to listen to what I have to say today, and then try to figure out what you can do next to either enhance your security of what you're doing on your macOS and iOS devices, or plan out some other future changes to your infrastructure to secure that. So, that being said, I'm going to dive into some of that housekeeping I was talking about. So, how does Jamf help you be compliant? We run into things in the financial industry with PCI, in the healthcare industry, run into HIPAA compliance. We've got personally identifiable information. We've got protected health information. What does that mean for Jamf? What does that mean for what we're doing to help you with your Apple devices? What that really means is that we help you mitigate the risk associated with those kinds of compliance criteria. So when we talk about the payment card industry and PCI and payment processing, how can we help you have devices that are secure, that allow you to be PCI compliant? HIPAA and PII, PHI, same kind of thing. So to give you one example of protected health information, we work on a lot of integrations. One of those integrations is with electronic medical record systems. Well, gosh, if we're going to integrate with that, we have to make sure we do it the right way. So I'll talk a little bit later about Infrastructure Manager. You may have heard me talk about that before. It's a component you can put in the DMZ, you can put it deep in your firewall, and we put components there that hook into other things. So when we talk about protecting health information and helping you mitigate that risk, all of the information that's going through that component is inside your network. And then you can API out just the things that you need that protect that information and can talk to the Jamf Pro instance and execute on those things and help automate the process. So again, it's that end user experience, providing that great end user experience, taking some of the workload off of you as IT administrators, and then tying that all in a secure way. So the other part of this is penetration tests and assessments. I've asked a few people kind of what's your experience been in doing assessments, in doing penetration tests of the software and the infrastructure, and I'm very happy to say that most of the responses I get are very positive. You did really well, better than we expected, really good. That being said, we have resources that can help you configure the settings, do different things, so that if you find something in a penetration test, talk to us about it. It's something that we can work together on. As we talk also about just the general world of security, there's going to be specific issues that you run into, questions that you're going to have, things like, file vault, right? So we have a P12 file for your institutional keys. For those individual keys, those are all 256 AES encryption. So we do encrypt things. I'll go through the FAQ of some of the security questions we get. Specific questions like that, just work with us on those. And if you're going to do a penetration test, bring us in the loop because we can share information and help you lock down your infrastructure. You might know we're also working on SOC 2 right now. So we expect to have a SOC 2 Type 2 report available in 2017. It's been an ongoing effort through 2016 to make sure we have all those controls and documentation in place around the availability, the processes, how we're controlling and releasing software. So look for that in 2017. To go into the macOS and iOS security side, I almost see this as a sort of a product roadmap summary because I'm going to talk a little bit about Apple operating systems, and I'll talk about some of the things that we've implemented on the product. So look for the product strategy and direction session. There's another one later today, but I'll be touching on a lot of the things that you'll hear in that as well. From an Apple operating system standpoint, we really strive for that pre-zero day or zero-day support for Apple operating systems, compatibility, and all of the functionality. So recently we saw some new things coming out, the show hide, configuration of the home screen, all things that if you're putting a device into a child's hand, a student's hand, for example, but of course also an employee's hand, you can control that experience more, lock down what applications they have access to. So we see that as a big win, and Apple's always been very good, as you know, and if you saw Fletcher talking about support cases and also the vulnerabilities associated with the different platforms. We recognize Apple operating systems, iOS and macOS side, are less subject to those kinds of vulnerabilities and so require less security maintenance. But also they support a lot of features that further the security of the platform, which is really great. So for all of you who are here and concerned about security, as I think we all are, that's a big win. The other thing that was implemented is lost mode. Lost modes come up in a few other sessions, and so that's that ability to put a device in lost mode, find out the location of that device, convey a message to the individual, so the individual can see like this device has been registered as lost. You can provide some information and context there, so that they can contact somebody, help remediate that if it is actually their device and it's not really lost, for example. But that's another great way of securing a device. And tying that in so that you can basically have a more secure infrastructure. We've talked a little bit about single sign-on. Again, I talked about it in my Jamf Cloud session. Single sign-on is something that I'll show you later because we really went about doing it because we wanted to secure the Jamf Pro login in a more secure way. But because we were implementing single sign-on, we brought it all the way to the end user and implemented it on the macOS self-service as well. So if you're going to do single sign-on with an identity provider, you can leverage that secure credential that you're using for login for your end user to use the self-service portal as well. So self-service supports your LDAP and Active Directory. It supports your single sign-on, all going towards security and ease of use for the user. And I'm going to jump more specifically into patch management. I know you've probably attended a patch management session, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm going to talk a little bit about our Cisco ISE integration. I'll talk a little bit about other integrations that we're looking to do, kind of forward thinking, and I'll also talk about certificate issuance, which is another future roadmap item. So patch management. If you attended an earlier session, you would have probably heard the Gartner quote talking about how through 2020, 99% of executed vulnerabilities are those that have been known for at least 1 year. That all speaks to that need to keep your software up to date, keep your operating systems up to date with the latest security patches. A very big thing, and so patch management is a big security push, as well as helping the end user stay current on software. So the security aspect of that is something that I specifically want to call out because patch does a lot of great things. One of the other key things it does is it ensures security of your software. So patch reporting, just very briefly, left-hand nav, you'll see patch reporting. Patch was first introduced in 9.9.3. So if you're running 9.9.3, you'll see it there. If I wanted to take a look at the titles, I can click on that new button, and I get a list of the supported titles. I'm sure there's lots of questions that have been previously answered and might be asked again here, but just bear in mind as you bring this up, it'll show you the list of currently supported titles that we are vetting. And then this is the way that you would add those, so if you wanted to track those and get notified, you could. So in this example, I'm looking at Adobe Photoshop. I get the tab here where I can pick my notifications. Do I want to be notified in the JSS? Do I want me as a user to be emailed a notification when we have an update for this available? We also have then the software definitions, and so you can see here this patch definition was verified by Jamf. You can see a log of previous versions and release dates. And at that point, it will be available to you. If you go to patch reporting, you'd see Adobe Photoshop listed. And you can scope further in to get reporting on the versions. So this gives you a nice view. Here, I'm scoped to the computers that are on the latest version. But you can change that. You can look at computers on other versions as well and better manage what you're doing. Now, in the patch presentation itself, you got to see a demo of some of the things that are coming with patch policies. Patch policies really provides the first specific policy that is geared toward an action, a workflow. And as we look at user interface improvements throughout the next year, there's going to be similar kinds of things that we look at where we know you're going to execute a particular workflow, and we want to make that easy for you. So with patch policies, we start looking at things like what computers are available. Does the app need to be closed? Do you need to reboot the system? You've probably heard it before, but just to reiterate, that is a very specific policy, and it's really to try to take the load off of you. With that, as we look to the future, we'll be doing more automation. How do we package those for you? So today you get the notifications, you get the reporting, you'd still have to package that. So we want to look at how we can package things for you, make it easier for you to deploy. And we've also gotten a lot of feedback around custom software titles. So custom software titles might be in-house apps that have been built that you want to also use the patch method to deploy. It could be trying to crowdsource it and getting feedback and sharing the definitions for titles that maybe Jamf hasn't added to its catalog yet. And we tried to pick up sort of the major ones, the most common ones. We'll be adding to that list. We'll be adding automation ourselves into the process. But in the meantime, we know that we need to be aware of the desire to do custom software as well. And I just want to say again, keep the feature requests coming. Keep us in the loop, be active on Jamf Nation, and let us know what you want to see next. We talked to some people on Tuesday night, and we're just saying, like, how far are you in this patch process? What are you using because the solution isn't fully where it needs to be? We have patch policies and automation and packaging to do yet. And some people are much further along. They're 90% there. So the question is, well, what would get you 100%? Think about that. Think about what is going to get you to where you want to be with that full solution, and keep us in the loop. Let us know. Next, I want to talk about Cisco ISE. Is anybody, well, first a show of hands. Who's familiar with Cisco ISE? OK, pretty good. Who's using Cisco ISE? OK, very good. This is really your network access control method if you're using Cisco. And we did an integration with Cisco ISE for this. So this is logical access control around the compliance of a device. And so I'll take a look, just kind of show you where this is in the user interface here. Down in your network organization, you'll see a setting here for network integration. It's on the far right there. And if you click in to create a network integration, what we have there today is Cisco ISE. So you can set that up. Now, as we look at the future of where we take these kinds of integrations, we're looking at those partners that help with network access control and other security types of benefits. So our Cisco ISE integration, I'll walk through just very briefly. So when you set this up, you get to define your criteria for your computers and for your mobile devices. And it's based on an advanced search. So you set up an advanced search and define the criteria that make for you a compliant device, a device that should be allowed on the network. In the case that you want to, you have a couple of optional messages. So if the verification fails, you can tell the user when then the device is not compliant. So you can customize a message for that. You can also put in a compliance or remediation message. So how can they get back into scope so that then they can get onto your network? We do the same thing on the mobile side. So again, set up a compliance-related search criteria. You can pick that from the drop-down of what you want that to be, and again, provide the failure message and the remediation message to your user. We want to make sure that your network is secure, of course, and we want to make sure that you can help the user a little bit. If for some reason they changed their passcode, it didn't meet your spec, you can go ahead and have them remediate that. Now, there are some things that we're looking to do in the future with Cisco, with the Cisco ISE integration, with other integrations. To talk specifically about that, for those who have encountered this already, if you plug into a Thunderbolt cable, we collect the MAC address of that Ethernet adapter. right? So where Cisco ISE is working really well today, we see, is in the wireless world, where the MAC address is the MAC address of the device. Now, we have UDID information. We have UUID, UDID, and that's something that we want to move more toward. And so we're looking at Cisco, and we're looking at what we can do to upgrade our API integration. One method is to get away from MAC address and use the UUID. To do that today would mean that we do a little bit of work to update our API integration. And then the AnyConnect client would need to be on the device. So that's one of the things that would need to be in place to move away from the MAC address to the UDID. But we continue to look at that and see, as we build this out and look forward, what are the other ways that we can enhance this and make it easier? So that's just something to be aware of. The other kinds of integrations. So earlier today, we had a ServiceNow session. That is another example. It's a little less directly related to protecting your devices, but if you have a single pane of glass, if you've got that one place where people are going to pull compliance reports, like the ServiceNow integration, that's a really good way of doing your compliance audits and your compliance reporting. So we're looking at a lot of reporting and business intelligence tools as a way to integrate. ServiceNow probably being the first one that would fit into that category. The unique thing about that, if you missed the session earlier, was it's not just an API-based integration. We also did a webhook, and that webhook allows us to dynamically trigger instant information back into your single pane of glass so it stays current. As soon as that record is updated in Jamf Pro, it transmits that out because of the webhook and updates the record in ServiceNow. So you get a really good view of what's going on in your environment. Tanya was here earlier. She is the Jamf Pro admin. She's a systems engineer at ServiceNow. Tanya also is a ServiceNow consumer because she works for ServiceNow, so she uses both platforms. And she was just talking about that, how stakeholders need to have that information at their fingertips. So the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, would be able to look at that and say, okay, they're all encrypted. Okay, they've all got this version of Flash on their devices. That helps take a lot of the manual process out of reporting. So we're looking at those kinds of things in the future as well. Another project that is on the horizon is certificate issuance. So I'll talk a little bit more about where we are and where this is going. But essentially, this is to provide better usability into providing secure credentials and certs to your users. We're looking at device certs. We're looking, this is common for Wi-Fi. It's common for VPN. And so this would allow you, for example, upon computer enrollment, to push down a configuration profile with the unique cert for that device. And then that unique cert would be what allows them to get onto your network. So again, if you're doing something like that, you're helping the user because you've got a certificate that allows them on the network. If you're also using Cisco ISE, now you've got a network access control in front of that as well so that you can ensure that the device is compliant. These things all kind of make one solid solution on having compliant devices on your network. So I'll talk a little bit more about this here to show you kind of where we are in the process. So our first step is to do issuance. And our first release is going to be specifically a Symantec integration. Now, why Symantec? Why not other CAs, certificate authorities that are out there? This just happens to be the thing that was the quickest to release. So we're releasing this. We've been working on a lot of other things. We're just releasing this because it happens to be ready. And so you can see this. This will probably be included in the Jamf Pro 10 release. So keep your eyes out for that. If you happen to be a Symantec user, you'll be able to benefit from this right away. But bear in mind, there's other things that we're working on as well. And so those will come in future releases in 2017. When you're setting up a certificate authority in Jamf Pro, one of the things you have to do is establish trust between Jamf Pro and that certificate authority. So there's steps to do that and configure that. So I'll just show you here. Now, I put one in here already, but so this would be where you pick your PKI provider, in this case, Symantec. And there's some steps to follow. I'm not going to show you all of those, but you'd walk through the steps of configuring that, getting the root cert and whatnot, so that you can talk successfully with Symantec. And the way this essentially works is kind of how I described with the enrollment. So the enrollment happens, triggers a configuration profile. We intercept that, make an API call to get a unique cert, and push that down. Oversimplifying, but with Symantec's case, you have the configuration profile that you set up here. So you'd have a profile that is configured in Jamf Pro. And on the Symantec side, there's also a profile that's used. So you kind of have like profiles that do your management. We have a plugin today that some people are using, and what we're doing here is we're replacing that plugin with native functionality to replicate that kind of behavior. And then you configure your cert here. So you can do one certificate per scope device, probably the way that most people are going to go. But if you did want to do kind of a global cert, you can do that as well. We've also been iterating on the user interface. So you'll see that this user interface is not the Jamf Pro 10 user interface, but you'll see that we have the start here. So, hey, I need to configure my certificate authority. I'll give you a little breadcrumb to jump into that and do that. So one example of that kind of functionality we're carrying on throughout the platform. And this is just an example. Obviously, this is dummy data. I don't know if I have the right number of characters in my serial numbers. I just did a bunch of zeros and ones. But this is a view of your active certs. So the end goal here is that when you have an integration with your CA and you're issuing certs this way, you also get to manage those here. So it's not just to provide the certificate. It's to help you not have to log into the Symantec portal all the time, in the case of Symantec, because you can manage those here. The first step that we're doing is just the issuance. So you'll get a report of all of the certificates that have been issued by Jamf Pro. You can see when they're going to expire. And then you can, end game, post this release, be able to renew and revoke those as well. So the first release is going to be the issuance. Now, the good thing is those certs are valid for a while. If a cert does happen to expire, you can always reissue a cert. Certs are usually user-based or device-based, so if you issue 10 certs to the same device, it doesn't necessarily cost you more. So take a look at how that works with your particular provider. But the end game here is let's make sure we can issue certs and enable the workflow, and then in a release soon after, we'll add the renewal and the revocation part of that. And we want you to do your management here where you're spending your time so you don't have to jump back and forth. There is some setup, of course, on both sides, but at that point, we want to give you that added flexibility. And then the last screen I believe I'll show here is just kind of the reporting, and this is the old dashboard, but you can add that to the dashboard, and you can see active, expiring, or inactive certs. Now, again, kind of what's coming. So our issuance is the first thing coming, specific CA being, in this case, Symantec. But we're looking at the other ones. I can't say any timeline along that, but there's Entrust, there's OpenTrust, IDnomic, and there's other providers out there that we're looking at. So be aware of that. We're also doing a SCEP proxy server. So that would be sort of, yeah. Who wants the SCEP proxy server? Just a couple people? That would be Jamf Pro acting as your SCEP proxy. So we want to facilitate those kinds of workflows. And we know that SCEP proxy gets us a lot more flexibility for people who have their own CA, are their own CA, and whatnot. So that's a really good thing. And then, as I said, renewal and revocation will come. Last thing I'll say about this, with renewal and revocation, we're also looking at the workflows tied to that. So what if you just want to auto-renew? Well, maybe you can auto-renew somebody's cert if they are still compliant with their device when that certificate expires. What are some of those workflows that we can enable so that you can automate some of those tasks, but do it in a secure way, right? So if a device is not compliant, well, maybe either let the cert expire or revoke that cert and trigger a message out to your user to say, hey, you're not compliant anymore. I don't want you on my network. So those are some things that are coming out. This is a project that's ongoing, so we're looking for feedback. I've got already some people who've been asking to be a part of this and test it and whatnot, so let us know, and if you've got specific features related to this, again, Jamf Nation's a good place to go. Infrastructure security, so what's new, what's coming? I'll walk through SSO and LDAP Proxy very quickly. How many of you were in the cloud session before? Okay, not as many as I thought, so I'll spend some time on those. We did single sign-on to secure the login to Jamf Pro. We decided to go the single sign-on with SAML 2.0 instead of doing just a generic two-factor, because you can throw two-factor in with your SSO. And that was kind of the market feedback was, no, do the single sign-on and work with the IDPs first. So we did that. If you still want a more traditional two-factor that's just built in, with phone or SMS or like a Google Authenticator or something like that, again, let us know, and we're tracking those things very carefully. I'll talk a little bit about our LDAP proxy server. These first two things really are to enable cloud. So again, security being a foundation for innovation, cloud not being anything new, but being something that is a game changer. It was for Salesforce. When Salesforce went cloud, that changed the game in what they were doing, and they were able to capture market share and drive that industry because they had a cloud offering. It was huge. That's been around for a while, but if it's not secure, you can't use it. So that's why we've been doing things to enable cloud adoption. I'll talk a little bit about our infrastructure manager, and I'll talk a little bit about what else you can do from a cloud standpoint. Now, single sign-on, I'll point out, is not just for cloud instances. You can spin that up and use it on an on-premise environment. So if you want to do that, you can do that. It was really geared towards security in the cloud. You can still do it if you're on-premise. So let's take a quick look here. Single sign-on is in your system settings. You just go in here, and in this example, I'm just going to show you the configuration on the Jamf Pro side. You'd have to go into your provider and configure an application and get the metadata file set up and whatnot. So there's some configuration on both sides, but you would tie this in, and then you've got some options for your single sign-on. So kind of the primary use case is the Jamf login itself. Again, we have some naming changes that are going on. So here you'll see the JSS there. That's the primary one, but you can also use it for self-service for your macOS self-service client, and you can use it for macOS, for user-initiated enrollment as well. So if you have user-initiated enrollment workflows still in your environment, you can turn it on for that as well. Now, as far as the future with DEP and single sign-on, that's something that we're continuing to look at. It's kind of one of those active projects that's out there. The one thing I'll say about this, security being key, we also want to not prevent you from logging into your own thing. So if for some reason something goes wrong, we do have a failover URL. That failover URL will allow you to bypass your single sign-on provider and access the Jamf Pro instance with your normal user credential. That's tied to a user role and permissions. So you have to have the right permissions to be able to use that failover URL. That's, again, to provide you the flexibility to continue to maintain your infrastructure should something happen in that process and you need to get in. But you can still lock that down so that it's not a failover URL that everybody can use. So I want to point that out as well. There are a number of identity providers that we've actively set up and tested. So Active Directory Federation Services, Okta, OneLogin, Ping Identity, Shibboleth. Those are some of the ones that we've worked through. We have documentation on how to help you set those up. And so those are kind of, when I say supported, those are the ones that we have vetted and we've tested with. Now, you might have Google out there, and you might want to do SAML 2.0 with Google. Go ahead and do that. We followed the SAML 2.0 spec, so you should be able to configure that. You'll need to use the metadata file or the metadata URL, and then customize that and get that out. So what's coming for single sign-on? One of the things that we're seeing as a trend is going away from Active Directory or directory services, using the identity provider as that directory service. So like a just have Google, don't have an Active Directory, those kinds of environments. And so it might not be something that we see right away, but I've heard that there is more trend moving that direction. So we're looking at how to do the same kind of thing that you would do with an Active Directory integration in a single sign-on in an identity provider world, where they become your directory service. So we're looking at that and how to enable that. That'll be something that we continue to work toward as we know that certain organizations are going that way. Infrastructure Manager and the LDAP Proxy. So in the spirit of time, I know I only have about 15 minutes left. I might not go into as much detail as this as I normally would. But we want you to be able to use LDAP if you're in the cloud. So if you're in the cloud and you want to use LDAP, we don't want you to have to poke a hole and open up your LDAP to the public. So we've put in an LDAP proxy server. It's really a gatekeeper that handles the secure communication between, in this case, your Jamf cloud instance, the LDAP proxy. They talk, they do cert exchange, and make sure that's a secure communication channel. And then that LDAP proxy server will be able to talk to your LDAP. Then you can use the directory service the way you're kind of accustomed to, populating user information, using it for the self-service login, using it to scope into groups, right? All of those activities. So I just want to walk through very quickly, where can you find the LDAP proxy server, the infrastructure manager today? Go to your Jamf Nation assets, and you should see infrastructure manager there. We released this as part of 993. 993 included the infrastructure manager and the LDAP proxy and the single sign-on. What happens is you download that file. It's a Debian file. Go to command line, install that. And then as soon as it's installed, it will enroll with your JSS. Dollar in the jar. In your Jamf Pro instance. Your infrastructure manager's down here. If you click on that, you're not going to find anything unless you have successfully installed it and it is checking in and enrolled in your environment. So here I've got one that's showing up, and I'll just show you here. I gave it a name. You can see when it last checked in, its IP address, operating system, and how often it's checking in. All right, so you get some information on that infrastructure manager. Once you've got that set up, the next thing is just to take your LDAP, get that set up, and configure it to use the LDAP proxy server. It's actually very easy. So you go into your LDAP servers. In this case, I'm selecting my Active Directory demo instance, and I can see all of my values and configurations here. And I'll just highlight this area. This is our Enable LDAP Proxy Server. So pick your proxy server. You can have multiple infrastructure managers installed. And then pick the proxy binding, port number, and you're good to go. And that will route your traffic the way you want to. Now, what's coming next with Infrastructure Manager? Infrastructure Manager is a container. It's got an LDAP proxy. We have another version of that, really geared toward healthcare. It would not go in your DMZ. It would go deep in your network. And that's to facilitate communication with electronic medical record systems. Again, we want to put the technology where you need it to be secure. So that particular thing would go deep in your firewall. End game for Infrastructure Managers, you can see other components will be added to that over time. We want those to be something that you can configure and set up so that if there's a new version of something, you can go out and get that dynamically and not have to constantly be checking for, is there a new LDAP proxy server available? What we'll be doing is, and this is a great thing, we can release the Infrastructure Manager as its own component because it is decoupled. So there's some things that we can do and iterate on that outside of a full Jamf Pro upgrade. So lastly, I want to point out some resources, and this is really your homework, right? This is where you can go to get more information about how you can secure your environment. So go to jamf.com/security. I'll show you that screen. There's a lot there. Just do a search. Go to jamf.com, go to Jamf Nation, and search for security. You're going to find things that people have built that enhance your security on Jamf Nation because people are constantly sharing great workflows. And on jamf.com, you're going to see a lot of white papers. You're going to see PDFs of steps that you can take. Earlier this week, there was a session on the Center for Internet Security and CIS checklist specs. That is scripts that execute specific things related to security that are tied to extension attributes. So check that out. We've got documentation on that as well. We can talk about securing your Jamf Pro instance, your JSS, and there's also a really good white paper on Apple native security. So the Jamf security page looks like this today. This is the new website. And if you scroll down this page, you're going to find a lot of good resources. You're going to find an FAQ, talks about our data encryption methodology, the AES 256 data encryption that I talked about, the TLS, yes, we always use TLS, how our password's stored, who has access to our data. Jamf Cloud, there's a really good bit of information about, well, how do you access our Jamf Cloud data? What's the privacy around that? And then where are our data centers, right? Another part of the security piece is if your data is in Germany, your data at rest stays in Germany. We want to ensure that we have those kinds of things as we build out our data centers. So we've talked a little bit about where we're going with data centers. We've got North America. We've got the Frankfurt, Germany data center. We're looking at Australia and Japan as other places to go. That is for both performance, but also security and making sure that data stays in country. So this is a really good resource. Again, this is if you search, you'll find a number of different things in the search. Homework item for you to take away. Apple native security, we've got a white paper out there. This talks about some of the great native Apple tech, right? Now, it's not very detailed, but it touches on a few things that I think are important to note, like the security of the App Store. So why do you have apps in the App Store? They're vetted by Apple. A good example, last week, Dash was removed. Dash was removed because of reports of fraudulent reviews. And so there were roughly 25 apps across a couple different accounts that got removed as a result of that. So you've got somebody helping you in securing your apps just by virtue of using the App Store. The Jamf security overview is probably the most robust. So if you're going to look at one document, go and look for the Jamf security overview document. This document is, I want to say, close to 20 pages roughly. This document also includes a really good table of contents, rich, deep dive into everything. So when we talk about things like the Jamf Cloud Distribution Service, it talks about how we secure that. It talks very briefly about encryption and all the different parts of your infrastructure. So it's a really good document. If you haven't seen it yet, I would ask you to go through that document. And then the things that are not answered, talk to us about. Engage with us and work with your Jamf team to do things if you've got a scheduled penetration test or something like that. We're happy to work with you through those things. This is the Securing Your JSS document. This is another really good document. Again, as you're looking at your infrastructure, you might find that there's security settings that you should take a closer look at. Of course, the administrator guide has information too on security settings. A lot of great resources out there. And then this is the macOS security checklist. So the Center for Internet Security has a benchmark for standards. This checklist, it provides kind of the basis of how you would do that. We have more resources available. If you didn't catch the CIS session earlier, there's Git repos out there that have information about this, and you can take a look at those repos. But it's scripts, it's extension attributes that extend out what you can do with our software to lock down certain parts of this specific spec. And so you might not be the kind of organization that requires this much security, but it's worth taking a look at if you're curious. So this is another really good resource for you. And then as far as a recap, again, I'd encourage you to take a look at those resources that are available. Think about the features that I just mentioned and what we're doing in the future, and give us your feedback so that we can build those the right way. Because we really want you to move forward with us and be able to adopt the technology that we put out there. We did have some questions actually from the before I open it up to the floor. We had some questions in the Jamf Cloud session, and I want to address some of that today, and it relates to sort of data encryption in the cloud and having access to the database. So when we look at the cloud instance and the privacy around that, if we need to go into the database, we would do it because of a specific support issue where you need us to go into the database. So just to be aware, we really want to respect the privacy of that. Now today we know that when you're in the cloud, you don't have direct access to the database. So one of the things I mentioned in that cloud session was we want to look over 2017 at how we get some of that control back into your hands. So if you need to do a restart, if you need to look at the database, things like that, you'd be able to do that. So we're looking at those things. That's one of those nuances of starting with protecting your infrastructure and managing that for you, and then giving some control back when it makes sense to do that. And then also, as I said earlier, with a database encryption, the fields that are sensitive information, we encrypt. So any data at rest that falls in that category will be encrypted. We use TLS, so data in transit is also encrypted.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joe. A lot of great information, and we had some great questions that came in over Twitter, so appreciate everybody going through and spending the time to do that. I've been monitoring and kind of grouped them into a couple different major headings. So the first is back around Cisco ISE in our integration. And one, the obvious one, what other integration points are we planning? Are there other specific vendors to look at? But then going just to ISE, things like if someone falls out of compliance, they lose their network connectivity, how do we know if they're back into compliance for self-resolution? And then just a little bit more on the criteria that's there for utilizing that integration.
Yep. So good question. It's obviously very broad. I think I could talk about it for a while. So there's other vendors that are out there that are like Cisco ISE. So we'll be looking at those and having those discussions. Part of our strategy is the follow the app strategy. You may have heard that before. And that means looking at partners and leveraging those common technologies. So a good example is we're talking to a company that does secure device wipe, right? They also do diagnostics on a device. So let's say you have a device that you want to reprovision, and you just want to do a diagnostic check of that device before you reprovision that. We're looking at partners like that that have that kind of technology to say, okay, let me just run a diagnostic and see what's this computer look like today. Is there anything I should be concerned about? That's one type of integration that we're looking at. And then the other players in the network access control. Now, more specifically, if you're like, oh gosh, they're not connected to the network, how do I know that they're compliant again? Well, you really won't until they connect again and can talk to all the different pieces that will check to make sure that they are compliant. So they might be stuck on a guest network until they're able to get that device compliant again. But it's part of that message. And I know you only get the one field to specify what that message is, but trying to provide some information, link them out somewhere, say, hey, go to this location to get more information about what a compliant device is at our organization, that even something like that might not specifically tell them what to do, but it will help them get some guidance. We want them to get whatever they can on their own. And then the last thing I would say is that we are looking at how to enhance that so that you can more specifically say, yeah, I've got not just this one compliance search, I've got a number of things broken down, and this is the one that you violated, as well as this one and this one. So we're looking at ways that we can enhance that as well to provide more user-initiated remediation.
Great, thanks, Joe. Another kind of major heading and stuff that came up is just to talk more around the infrastructure manager, and if I were to want an infrastructure manager and use some of the other tools that are going to be put there, do I need unique ones per instance? How do I set that up? You showed some of the download, but just a little bit more on uniqueness and how to manage that.
Sure. So we have an installation guide. We're releasing new installers. So the one that I showed you, I put in Ubuntu. But we're releasing like a Windows installer and RHEL, Red Hat installer as well. Those should be out, or if not out now, very soon. And we've got installation guides on those. As I said, we want to make it flexible. So right now, we kind of pick what you put in that component. So when you get the infrastructure manager today, it has the LDAP proxy in it. If you get the version of the infrastructure manager that has our, in this case, it's an Epic electronic medical record integration, that would be a separate infrastructure manager. We want you to be able to install them when you need them. So as we build that out, we'll be looking at what else we would add to that. So if there's things that you would envision putting there that we can build and put, or if you just want to be able to put your own things there, let us know, and that's a conversation we can have.
Yeah, great. The next two are a little bit more just notifications and how we have the conversation. So one, how are notifications to the Jamf Nation about vulnerabilities that are known, supported versions of different services that are used? How do we do those notifications, and where can they look to find that?
That's a good question. Most of our documents are in the resources that I showed you here. I don't know that we have a CVE list out there of known vulnerabilities that we've published. Generally speaking, it goes back to the quote from the Gartner report. Most executed vulnerabilities are those that have been known for a while. So we track all of those, and we follow those through the system. We do regular penetration tests ourselves, and we have regular assessments as we go through release cycles. So we do a lot of testing on our own. But you can talk to us if you want to look at specific data or reports on what we're tracking. But we don't have a specific list out there that I've seen of CVE blah blah blah, Apache Commons Library vulnerability. Is it applicable or not? It's not applicable. But if you're looking for something like that, if you want us to get engaged in that kind of thing, we've had similar requests. One of the top 5 requests, I think, is a list of published support issues. So a support issue is different in escalation from a security issue. So similar kind of thing, but let us know what you're looking for there. Generally speaking, when we run across those kinds of vulnerabilities, we're going to try to remediate those right away, and then hopefully we will tell you about that so you can see and not have to call us. We don't want you finding out about a vulnerability and flooding us with calls that we have to answer all the time. We want to put that information in your fingertips to say, yeah, no, don't be worried about that. That's not going to impact you.
Great. So we got about 30 seconds left, and I got 2 questions that I want to ask, just kind of straight from the Twitter feed. One is with respect to, you mentioned a lot of different things that we can do to engage for the different future stuff. How do we start that conversation with the right people? Who do we go to say, I'm interested in this case about semantic and that integration and what's happening there? How do people engage there?
Very good question. So I would start first with your Jamf buddy or your technical account manager, whoever that person is that you're used to dealing with, and tell them what you're interested in, because they know who we are and they can put you in touch with the rest of the people. So in the case of like the semantic integration, that would be the opportunity to work with us ahead of the advance. Now, we'll have it in the beta program, But ahead of the beta program, there's other things that we want to talk to people about, like the SCEP proxy. So start with your Jamf representative account manager and work through that channel, and we can set up meetings. We can get communities together to talk about these things together. I think that's a really good way. Now, if it's something that's already in the product, if it's the infrastructure manager and you're like, what do I need? What can I do? And I know we're going into lunchtime, so feel free, if you're really hungry like me, go out there. You have to be on 993 to get the infrastructure manager. So if you're not on 993 yet, you need to be on 993. That file that comes down, I realize I didn't go into a lot of detail. It's a Debian file. So you go into command line, and you install that in command line, and it walks you through some screens, and you name it, and then it enrolls. So there's a little bit of information there. We have good installation documentation on that. But yeah, just check what's in what version. 993 had a lot of that functionality. The things that are not there are the future patch things we've been talking about, the cert lifecycle that we've been talking about.
Yeah, great. Thanks. We're going to say thank you. Give Joe a round of applause. Thanks for the work that he did.
Thanks, everybody.